undisputed leader of the National Conference, just took a devastating hit that nobody saw coming. And it wasn't on the field of play. It was in the press room, in front of the cameras, with the entire NFL world watching. A head coach just said something that has the entire city of Chicago completely paralyzed, jaws on the floor, hearts in their hands. We're talking about public statements that put the immediate future of a #1 overall draft pick quarterback in serious question. And all this is happening just days before the most important and decisive showdown of the entire season. If you're a Bears fan, if you bleed navy blue and orange, you need to hear this right now, at this very moment, because what's about to explode in the next 72 hours could completely change the course of this historic campaign. Monday morning, in what should have been a routine weekly review press conference at Hollis Hall, Ben Johnson dropped a nuclear bomb that echoed like deafening thunder throughout the entire Chicago Bears training complex. The head coach, known throughout the league for his direct, unfiltered, and brutally honest approach, had absolutely no qualms about pointing out the giant elephant that's been walking around the room for weeks. The Bears' passing offense, the aerial attack of a team leading the National Conference with a 9-3 record, simply is not working. And Johnson said it in the clearest, most direct, and most impactful way possible. The coach's words were, like a bucket of ice-cold water over the entire organization. Johnson was absolutely categorical, leaving no room for ambiguous interpretations, in stating that each and every member of the team has a fundamental role to play in cleaning up, correcting and elevating the level of the passing game. In his own words, verbatim, without editing or softening, the aerial attack is not even remotely close to where it needs to be to compete at the highest level in January. But what really caught everyone's attention, what made the reporters stop, writing and look up in disbelief, was when Johnson declared without hesitation that the Bears are winning in spite of their passing game, not because of it, not through it, not with its help, but in spite of its deficiencies. And he finished the statement, driving the final nail, saying that none of them, from the offensive coordinator to the last receiver on the roster, is satisfied with that. None. These explosive statements, these words that normally a coach would reserve for private conversations in the locker room, come at the most critical and inopportune moment possible. The Bears just came out victorious from a Black Friday showdown against the Philadelphia Eagles, defending Super Bowl champions with a final score of 24-15. It was an important victory, yes, a win that keeps Chicago atop the conference. But it was a victory that left much to be desired in terms of efficiency, precision, and execution in the aerial attack. Caleb Williams, the second-year quarterback who arrived in Chicago with so much hype, fanfare, and stratospheric expectations. From the University of Southern California, where he won the Heisman Trophy and broke every imaginable record, completed just 17 of 36 passes against the Eagles. Let's do the simple math. That's a 47.2% completion rate. Less than half of his attempts found his receiver's hands. To put it in an even rawer and more painful perspective, Williams threw for only 154 yards in the entire game. 154, his worst mark of the entire season. His lowest statistical line since he put on the Bears jersey. Additionally, and this is critical, he gave away an interception at a moment in the game that, under other circumstances, against a more offensively efficient opponent, could have cost the entire game. But the problem isn't just one game. It's not just one cold afternoon at Soldier Field. Accuracy, the ability to put the ball where it should be, when it should be, has been Williams' persistent and frustrating Achilles heel throughout his entire first full season under Ben Johnson's command and tutelage. After 12 games as the undisputed starter, after 3 months of regular season, the young quarterback occupies a position that no franchise player, no #1 draft pick, no future of the organization wants to occupy. Williams is in last place, the number 33 spot among 33 eligible quarterbacks in the entire National Football League in completion percentage, 58.1%. It's an alarming, worrying, and frankly unacceptable statistic for any team at any level. But it's especially devastating for a team leading its conference that has legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, that's supposed to be building around its franchise quarterback. And here comes the historical data that puts everything in an even more terrifying perspective. According to verified information from OptaStats, publicly shared by respected NFL researcher Tony Holzman Escareno, Caleb Williams is on track to become the first quarterback since the year 1975, exactly 50 years ago, half a century of league history, to lead a team with the number one seed in its conference while simultaneously ranking last in the entire league in completion percentage. It's a record nobody wants. It's a historical distinction for all the wrong reasons. The last time, the only time in the modern era of football that a quarterback finished in the bottom five in that critical category while his team was the number one seed was in the year 2006. And here's the cruel irony, the twist of fate that makes the story even more cinematic. That player, that quarterback who led a team to the top of the conference with terrible accuracy numbers, was Rex Grossman. And Rex Grossman played for the Chicago Bears. That same year, that same season, Chicago made it all the way to Super Bowl 41 in Miami. They reached the biggest game in the sport, but the story didn't have a happy ending. The Bears ended up losing to Peyton Manning's Indianapolis Colts in a game played under torrential rain. And many analysts, many experts, pointed directly to Grossman's inconsistency in the passing game as one of the determining factors of the defeat. Johnson, however, and this is important to highlight because it shows his maturity as a leader, was extremely careful and deliberate in not loading all the responsibility, all the weight of blame, exclusively onto the young shoulders of Caleb Williams. The coach, with the experience of having been offensive coordinator of one of the league's most explosive attacks in Detroit, publicly acknowledged that the quarterback requires, demands more consistent help from his receivers. And the numbers back him up. Pro Football Reference, one of the sport's most reliable statistical sources, credits Chicago with 18 dropped balls, 18 perfectly thrown passes that ended up on the ground because the receiver couldn't catch them. This season, that places them tied for 6th place in the entire league in that negative category. It's a collective problem, a systemic failure that goes far beyond the quarterback's arm, mechanics, or decisions. But here's the real challenge, the real pressure. That makes Johnson's statement so urgent and so necessary. Maintaining the number one seed in the National Conference, maintaining home field advantage throughout the playoffs, maintaining the right to play all postseason games at home, at Soldier Field, in front of their people, with Chicago weather, as an ally, could prove extremely complicated, almost impossible. If the aerial offense doesn't improve dramatically and quickly in the next 2 weeks, the Bears will face the Green Bay Packers, their historical arch-rival, their lifelong divisional enemy, the team they hate most and that hates them most, with a current record of 8 wins, 3 losses and 1 tie in weeks 14 and 16. 2 games, 2 direct confrontations, 2 opportunities for Green Bay to steal the division lead. And the Packers aren't just any defense. They're not a team you can beat just by running the ball. They currently rank 6th in the entire league in passing yards allowed per game, with a microscopic average of only 186.5 yards. They have an elite secondary. They have a devastating pass rush. They have exactly the type of defense designed to expose the weaknesses of an inaccurate quarterback, according to detailed mathematical projections published by The Athletic, one of the country's most respected sports publications. The Bears' chances of winning the NFC North Division dropped catastrophically, plummeting from 93%, almost a mathematical certainty, to just 37%, less than half, if they lose both games against Green Bay in the next 3 weeks. It's a brutal drop. It's the difference between controlling your destiny and depending on other results. It's the difference between playing at home in January and having to travel to hostile places like Philadelphia, Detroit or San Francisco. It's precisely for that reason, for all these accumulated reasons, for all this pressure that's building like a pressure cooker about to explode, that Ben Johnson is trying to light a massive fire, a giant flame under his offense right now at this precise moment. Before it's too late to correct course, the pressure is completely on Caleb Williams. The pressure is on Romo Duns, on DJ Moore, on Cole Kmet, on every receiver who must catch balls. The pressure is on the entire offensive unit without exception. And Ben Johnson, with these public and brutally honest statements, has just made absolutely clear, without room for doubt or interpretation, that he is not willing under any circumstances to settle for mediocre victories, for ugly wins, for games won in spite of the offense, if they really want to go far, if they really want to compete for a championship, if they really want to fulfill the expectations that the entire city of Chicago has placed on them. Do you think Johnson is being too harsh on Williams? Or is this exactly the wake-up call this team needs right now? What would you do if you were in Caleb's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you followed the Good Morning Football program on NFL Network at any point during the last few years, if you've tuned in even once to that morning roundtable that discusses everything related to professional football, you know perfectly well that Kyle Brandt is probably, without exaggeration, the biggest declared, passionate and vocal Chicago Bears fan you're going to find on all of national television. He's a man who has navy blue and orange tattooed on his soul. He's someone who doesn't hide his love for their Bears, who celebrates every victory as if he won the lottery, and who suffers every defeat as if it were a personal tragedy. So it shouldn't surprise absolutely anyone that it was precisely him, Kyle Brandt, who took it upon himself to preach the gospel, to spread the good word of Ben Johnson and his ascending, unstoppable and increasingly dominant Bears squad on Monday morning's episode of the show, right after their resounding, crushing, and categorical Black Friday victory over the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions, the reigning kings of professional football. But as Brandt pointed out with his characteristic passion and eloquence, with that contagious energy that characterizes him in front of the cameras, it's not just about the simple fact that the Bears beat the Eagles. It's not just that Chicago added another victory to their win column. It's not only that they maintained their position atop the National Conference. It's about something much deeper, much more significant, much more revealing about the identity this team is building. It's about how they did it. It's about the method, the philosophy, the style with which they dominated an elite opponent. Brandt was absolutely emphatic, pounding the table for emphasis, raising his voice with conviction, in explaining that it wasn't the Eagles' offense that had problems in that game. It wasn't Jalen Hurts who played poorly. It wasn't Philadelphia's aerial attack that failed. It was exactly the opposite. It was the Bears' offensive line. It was Chicago's runners. It was Ben Johnson's ground game that literally ran through the teeth, through the heart, through the soul of that expensive defense, of that defensive wall built with million-dollar investments by General Manager Howie Roseman. All those Jalen Carters, all those Georgia guys selected in the first round of the draft, all those five-star defensive players who were supposed to dominate the line of scrimmage did absolutely nothing. They were neutralized. They were dominated. They were humiliated in the trenches. But Brandt's passionate comments weren't remotely intended to belittle, insult, or disrespect the Eagles, who despite the loss are still an extremely good team. Legitimate contender with an 8-4 record. It wasn't to mock Philadelphia. It was exactly the opposite. It was to exalt, to celebrate, to put on a pedestal what the Bears did. It was to highlight the feat. According to Brandt's own verbatim words, with that huge smile that spread across his face as he said it, this victory, this absolute physical dominance, this demonstration of power in the trenches is Ben Johnson's masterpiece. It's his Mona Lisa. It's his Sistine Chapel. It's the maximum expression of his vision as a coach. The beating the Bears gave Philadelphia with their ground game. with that relentless, tireless, and devastating running attack. Felt like something taken directly, without modifications, from the 2006 season. That magical season when the Bears reached the Super Bowl. Old school football. Downhill football, direct, without tricks or flourishes. Physical, punishing, brutal football that breaks the opponent's will. Football that makes defenders not want to keep tackling in the fourth quarter. That style of play that literally broke the will, the fighting spirit of the reigning Super Bowl champions. Of a team that prides itself, that builds its complete identity around dominating other teams in the trenches, around winning the physical. Battle at the line of scrimmage. But this victory also reveals, also exposes, also makes absolutely clear once again with the first year. Bears head coach's fundamental philosophy is really about in its purest essence. And this is where Brandt really gets interesting, where his analysis goes beyond the surface, where he demonstrates why he's one of the program's most respected analysts. Brandt was absolutely clear, leaving no room for ambiguities in debunking a common misconception, a mistaken idea that many people, many fans had about Ben Johnson and what he wanted, what he planned, what he dreamed the Bears would be this year. Many people, too many people, automatically thought that, given his brilliant and successful past as offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, one of the most explosive and exciting attacks in the entire league during the last 2 seasons, Johnson would come to Chicago with a vertical, explosive aerial attack full of ingenious plays, exotic formations, deep passes flying all over the field like fireworks. Many people assume we'd see Caleb Williams throwing 50 passes per game, accumulating 400 passing yards every Sunday, breaking rookie records every week. But that assumption, that expectation, was completely wrong. It was based on a superficial reading of who Ben Johnson really is as a coach. Because the truth, the reality that Brandt brilliantly exposed, is that Ben Johnson's bread and butter, with the Lions, the fundamental base of everything he built in Detroit, was never the explosive aerial attack. It was David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. It was those two perfectly complementary runners. It was the ground game, running and running, establishing the run, physically dominating, controlling the clock, wearing down defenses. That's what Johnson really wanted. That's what Johnson really valued. That's what Johnson knew won championships in January when the weather turns brutal and games are decided by will, not by skill. And that's exactly word for word what he's meticulously building. In Chicago, the Bears have this experienced veteran, battle-tested in D'Andre Swift, who after years of ups and downs in his career, after years of ups and downs in his career, after inconsistent seasons bouncing between Detroit and Philadelphia, is playing at an absolutely elite level right now, at this precise moment in his career. He's healthy. He's motivated. He's running with power and purpose. And they have this 7th-round rookie, this kid nobody expected anything from, Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers, who looks exactly, identically like Ashton Genie from Boise State. Was supposed to look when everyone projected him as a top 10 pick in the 1st round. Monangai is running with violence. He's breaking tackles. He's making defenders miss. He's finishing runs by falling forward for extra yards. And together, this dynamic duo, this perfectly complementary tandem of veteran experience and rookie hunger, ran for damn near 300 yards, 281 to be exact, against the defending Super Bowl champions, against a team that just won the Lombardi Trophy 9 months ago, against a defensive line that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to assemble. They absolutely dominated, controlled, and dictated the pace of the game from start to finish. In 2 of the last 3 seasons, the Philadelphia Eagles have ridden their offensive and defensive lines, their physical dominance in the trenches, all the way to the Super Bowl. They've overwhelmed people up front with pure blunt force trauma, with power, with physicality, with the ability to impose their will on opponents, regardless of scheme or strategy. And the Bears, the Chicago Bears, playing at home at Soldier Field, just showed they could play that exact same game even better. They beat Philadelphia at their own game. They out-physicaled the most physical team in football. In fact, the ground game was so devastatingly effective, so completely dominant, so utterly unstoppable that they didn't even need Caleb Williams to do much of anything through the air. The quarterback, the #1 overall pick, the future of the franchise, finished with just 154 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Those are backup quarterback numbers. Those are game manager statistics. Those are the type of numbers that get quarterbacks benched on bad teams. But here's the thing. Here's what makes this so fascinating and so important for understanding what Ben Johnson is building. The Bears didn't need Williams to be Patrick Mahomes. They didn't need him to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. They didn't need fireworks and highlight reel plays. They needed him to be efficient, to not turn the ball over, to make the occasional play when absolutely necessary, and most importantly, to hand the ball off and get out of the way while the offensive line and running backs did the heavy lifting. With the Chicago Bears currently sitting pretty atop the National Conference with the best record in the entire NFC, with home field advantage throughout the playoffs within their grasp. There's a very real, very legitimate chance that teams, good teams, playoff caliber teams, Super Bowl contending teams will have to come to Chicago, will have to travel to Soldier Field, will have to play in that building and stand up to the Bears' increasingly dominant and bruising physical style in freezing temperatures, in brutal wind, in potential snow this January when the playoffs begin. And that reality, that scenario, should get every single Bears fan absolutely fired up with excitement and anticipation. Kyle Brandt, always the entertainer, always looking for ways to celebrate great football, even joked on air with that huge smile on his face that maybe, just maybe, he'll have a chance to hand out a few of his famous angry run scepters. Those awards he gives to running backs who run with violence and attitude. The Kyle Monon guy while we're at it. And honestly, genuinely, after what we saw on Black Friday afternoon, after watching that rookie run through, around and over NFL defenders, it wouldn't be even remotely surprising. The kid earned it. He deserves the recognition. What Kyle Brandt is saying, what he's preaching to the entire NFL audience watching Good Morning Football, is simple but absolutely profound in its implications. Ben Johnson didn't come to Chicago to reinvent the wheel. He didn't come to revolutionize offensive football. He didn't come to create some exotic, never-before-seen system that would blow people's minds with creativity. He came to build a physical, dominant, old-school football team that can win in January when the weather turns absolutely brutal, when conditions become miserable, when games are decided not by who has the best plays drawn up, but by who wants it more in the trenches. And, so far, through 12 games, through 3 months of regular season football, that's exactly precisely what he's doing. He's building an identity. He's establishing a culture. He's creating a team that opponents will dread facing when the temperature drops below freezing and the wind whips off Lake Michigan. Ben Johnson is trying desperately to light an absolutely massive fire under his entire offense before playing the Green Bay Packers on Sunday afternoon. And he's not being even remotely subtle about it. He's not hiding behind diplomatic language. He's not protecting feelings. He's going straight for the jugular. The Bears, sitting comfortably at 9 wins and 3 losses, will enter Sunday's showdown with the absolute best record in the entire National Conference when they take on the 8 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie Packers at Soldier Field. The winner of this contest, this battle, this war between divisional archrivals, will take sole possession of the lead in the brutally competitive NFC North before Week 15 arrives. The stakes couldn't possibly be higher. This is everything. This is what the entire season has been building toward. Chicago is coming off a contest, that Black Friday game we've been discussing, where the running game absolutely carried them, where the ground attack saved them, where Dandre Swift and Kyle Monangai helped them defeat the Philadelphia Eagles 24-15. The Bears rushed for 281 yards total, with rookie sensation Kyle Monangai and veteran workhorse Dandre Swift each rushing for more than 100 yards individually. It was a dominant performance on the ground. A statement game for the offensive line and running backs. But here's the problem. Here's what has Ben Johnson so visibly frustrated, so clearly agitated, so obviously concerned. Quarterback Caleb Williams completed just 47.2% of his passes for 154 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception in that win. Less than half his throws found their target. Less than half. For a number. 1 overall pick for a Heisman Trophy winner. For someone who's supposed to be the future face of the franchise. Those numbers are simply unacceptable at this level of football. During his press conference on Monday, just 3 days before the biggest game of the season, Johnson told reporters in no uncertain terms that Williams' accuracy, his ability to complete passes at a consistent rate, has been a major topic of discussion, a significant point of emphasis, a critical area of concern within the coaching staff and organization. According to Dan Wiederer of The Athletic, one of the most respected and well-connected Bears beat writers in the business, Johnson stated very clearly that it's an area they have certainly talked about extensively. There's no question about it. No ambiguity. No hiding from the truth. But Johnson, never one to pull punches or soften his message, went significantly further than just acknowledging the problem exists. He made it absolutely crystal clear, leaving zero room for misinterpretation, that he's not satisfied, not even remotely pleased with the passing attack in general, with the entire aerial operation, with the complete execution of the offense when they're forced to throw the football. His exact words, delivered with that intense stare that has become his trademark, were absolutely devastating in their honesty and directness. Everybody has a role to play to get this pass game cleaned up, Johnson said while looking directly into the cameras, making eye contact with reporters, ensuring his message will be heard loud and clear throughout the organization and across the entire league. It's not where it needs to be. Period. Full stop. No excuses. No justifications. No spinning the narrative dot. Then came the hammer blow. The statement that will be replayed on sports talk shows for days. The quote that will dominate headlines and social media discussions. We're winning in spite of our passing game, not because of it. Read that again. Let it sink in. The head coach of the team with the best record in the National Conference just publicly admitted on the record for everyone to hear that their passing attack is so problematic, so deficient, so far below standard that they're succeeding despite its failures rather than because of its contributions. And he finished with one final declaration that left absolutely no doubt about where things stand. And none of us are pleased with that. None. Not the offensive coordinator. Not the quarterback's coach. Not the receivers coach. Not the players. Not the front office. Nobody in the entire organization is happy or satisfied with the current state of the passing game. It's a collective acknowledgement of failure. A public admission that something fundamental needs to change immediately. These words are harsh. They're brutal. They're the kind of public criticism that many coaches, especially those dealing with young quarterbacks still developing their skills and confidence, would avoid at all costs because of the potential damage to a player's psyche, to their belief in themselves, to their ability to perform under pressure. Public criticism of a quarterback can be dangerous. It can break a young player. It can destroy confidence that takes years to rebuild. But these statements could also be precisely what Chicago's offense needs to hear at this critical juncture following an ugly, unconvincing Week 13 win over the Eagles. Sometimes a team needs a wake-up call. Sometimes they need someone to tell them the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes they need to be shaken out of complacency. And Ben Johnson, with his track record of success, with his reputation for developing offenses, with his credibility earned over years of excellence, clearly believes this is that moment. This is the time for tough love. This is when you challenge your players publicly to see how they respond, the Bears will need Williams and his receivers. The entire group of pass catchers, including Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and everyone else, to play significantly better, to elevate their performance dramatically, to reach another level of execution in the coming weeks as the team fights desperately for high seeding. Ideally, that coveted number 1 seed in the National Conference for the postseason, home field advantage throughout the playoffs, the ability to play every game at Soldier Field, the chance to make opponents travel to Chicago in January. All of that is at stake. Williams has thrown for 2,722 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, while completing just 58.1% of his passes through 12 games. That completion percentage is the worst, the absolute worst, the dead last among all 33 qualifying starting quarterbacks in the entire National Football League. It's a statistic that cannot, under any circumstances, continue if Chicago has legitimate, realistic aspirations of making a deep playoff run and competing for a championship. The passing game has gotten the Bears by, has kept them afloat, has allowed them to survive with backup-level execution until the running game finally woke up and dominated the Eagles on Friday. But that formula, that approach, that strategy is not sustainable for postseason success. You cannot win 3 or 4 consecutive playoff games in January and February by just running the football. Eventually, probably against the Packers this Sunday, definitely at some point in the playoffs, Williams will need to make big plays through the air. He'll need to convert critical third downs with his arm. He'll need to score touchdowns when the defense knows the pass is coming. He needs to reach another cylinder, another gear, another level of consistent execution for Chicago to be considered a true, legitimate Super Bowl contender rather than just a regular season team with a good record that will get bounced in the first round. And Ben Johnson, with these calculated, deliberate, and brutally honest public statements, has just let the entire world know, has announced to every analyst and fan and media member that he is not willing under any circumstances to wait any longer. The patience has run out. The excuses are over. The development period is finished. The time for improvement is now, not next week, not next month, not next season. Right now, the showdown with the Packers, the battle on Sunday afternoon at Soldier Field in front of 70,000 screaming fans, is the absolute perfect stage, the ideal moment, the ultimate opportunity for Caleb Williams to prove once and for all that he can respond to public pressure, that he can elevate his game when it matters most, that he can be the quarterback everyone expected, everyone hoped, everyone believed he would be when the Bears selected him number 1 overall in the draft. Because if he doesn't respond, if Williams has another mediocre performance, if he completes less than 60% of his passes again, if he can't make the necessary plays when Green Bay's defense forces Chicago to throw, if he shrinks under the bright lights and intense pressure of a divisional rivalry game with playoff implications, then the doubts will only grow louder, stronger, more impossible to ignore. And those doubts could spread like a virus through the entire team at exactly the wrong time, right when they need confidence and belief the most. The pressure is completely, totally, absolutely on. The expectations have never been higher. The stakes couldn't be more significant. And everyone from Chicago to Green Bay, from New York to Los Angeles, from coast to coast across the entire country, will be watching every single movement, every throw, every decision that Caleb Williams makes on Sunday afternoon. The Chicago Bears are sitting at the top of the National Conference with the best record in the entire NFC, 9 wins and 3 losses, first seed, home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Everything they dreamed about back in August when training camp started is within their grasp. It's all right there for the taking, but the cracks are starting to show. The weaknesses are becoming impossible to ignore. The problems that were easy to overlook during a winning streak are now front and center for everyone to see. Ben Johnson has thrown down a direct, public, and brutally honest challenge to Caleb Williams and the entire aerial offense. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a recommendation. It wasn't gentle coaching advice delivered privately. It was a demand. It was an ultimatum barely disguised as constructive criticism. The question now? The only question that truly matters as we approach Sunday's showdown against Green Bay is whether the young quarterback can respond when it matters most, when the lights are brightest, when the pressure is most intense, against the divisional archrival in a game that could literally define not just the season, but potentially the entire future trajectory of the franchise for years to come. The pressure is on like never before. The expectations are sky high. The stakes couldn't possibly be greater. And the entire football world will be watching every snap, every throw, every decision that Caleb Williams makes on Sunday afternoon at Soldier Field. If you want to be the first to know the latest Bears news firsthand before anyone else, if you want to stay completely informed about every move, every statement, every development of this historic season, subscribe right now to this channel. Don't miss a single detail. Don't get left behind. Bear down, Chicago. Bear down.